love motorsports, and there are very few motorsports I love more than the World Rally Championship. It is just such an amazing challenge watching these drivers just fly through roads never designed for 70, 80, 100 mile an hour speeds. The cars are absolute legends. The drivers are some of the best to ever sit behind any wheel. But that begs the question. One question that always pops up when you talk about legendary racing series. What's your favorite season? Now, everybody will have their own different opinions. Some will say it's 1983, some will say it's 1995, 2001. I mean, the list goes on. There are seemingly endless possibilities for your favorite rally championship for different reasons. But for me, nothing will ever come close to the 1998 WRC season. In order to understand the 1998 WRC season, you first have to understand the rules that were followed at the time, that being the World Rally Car rules, which are basically what we've had for the last 20-odd years, up until this year, actually, and Group A. Now, to understand Group A, you have to first understand Group B, which was a brilliant time that pushed performance and technology farther than any other time in rallying history. It was also way too dangerous and resulted in several fatalities that ultimately ended the class in 1986. In fact, the class was ended so hastily that the FIA had to apply Group A touring car rules to rallying. Now that meant that for the first 6 years, Lancia and only Lancia won. Their Delta Integrale won 58% of all rallies between 1987 and their withdrawal in 1992. That withdrawal meant that Toyota could take their spot in the domination hierarchy in 1993 and 1994, but then they were caught cheating in 1995 with an illegal turbo restrictor that didn't restrict as much as it was supposed to. For that, they received a 2-year ban from the WRC, and they used that time to prepare for the 1998 season. So with that context laid down, let's meet our protagonists. We already met Toyota, so let's meet their rivals, Mitsubishi. Mitsubishi and their main driver Tommi Mäkinen had spent 1996 and 1997 battling it out with Colin McRae's Subaru. Colin was objectively the faster driver and helped secure Subaru both constructors' titles, but Mäkinen was always more consistent and secured both drivers' titles. Meanwhile, we have our other driver of the day, Carlos Sainz, the father of the Ferrari Formula 1 driver. At the time, he was racing for Ford, and was a little tired of losing. See, he was already a 2-time World Rally Champion with the pre-ban Toyota Celica. So when he heard that they were planning on re-entering the championship in 1998 with a new car, he was first through the doors. That new car was the Corolla WRC, using the new World Rally Car specifications. Now that means, unlike the Lancer Evolution driven by Mäkinen, Toyota did not have to follow homologation rules. But don't read too much into that, okay? I know I just sort of emphasized the difference between World Rally cars and Group A cars, but at the end of the day, both cars, Group A and WRC, were allowed to compete against each other with no handicaps. So both of them made around 300 horsepower and weighed 2,800 pounds and had the same tire sizes. I don't know why they were different, but there you go. What that means, though, is that we have two very successful rally teams with very similar cars who both have proven winners behind the wheel, and they're both gunning for their third title. Remember Sebastian Vettel versus Lewis Hamilton in 2018, the fight for 5? This was the WRC equivalent. But let's not rule out Colin McRae. Remember, he was champion in 1995 and runner-up in 96 and 97, and again, he was probably the fastest guy on the grid when he's not rolling into the scenery. So, we have our stars, we have our cars, we have the challenge ahead of us. But we also have to explain the rules, the scoring system for this challenge, because, well, if you judge it based off of our current WRC scoring system, which is shared with the Formula 1 season, things would turn out very differently. Nowadays, they award 25 points for the win, decreasing down all the way to 10th position. But back in the 90s, they were using the 90s F1 scoring system where first only got 10 points, and then it decreased down only to 6th. Like I said, very important that we establish the scoring system so we're not following the current rules. So with all that context explained, we begin the 1998 season as always in the mountains of Monte Carlo. With its mixture of tarmac and heavy snow, it's a tough rally to master, and Mäkinen didn't have a great start, sliding off the road into a ravine and out of the rally. Sainz, on the other hand, was incredibly consistent and took an easy win to start off the season, and the snow stayed put as they headed to the Swedish rally. Mäkinen was in better form and scored Finland's 100th victory in the WRC, but those celebrations hid an unfortunate caveat. Carlos finished second, maintaining his championship lead over Mäkinen. The next rally was the brutal Safari Rally in Kenya. More like the Dakar than the WRC, it's a test of durability as much as driver skill. And that meant both of our main protagonists had to retire, which meant that Mäkinen's teammate, Richard Burns, won his first ever WRC event and pushed Mitsubishi to the Constructors' title lead. Mäkinen was continuing to not help Mitsubishi. His season just had an atrocious beginning when he met a tree in Spain, while Sainz finished second behind McRae's first win of the season. Sainz, despite McRae and Mäkinen each winning one rally apiece, had a commanding lead over the consistent Ford Escort of Kekkonen. And thanks to his myriad of mishaps, Mäkinen wasn't even being talked about as being in contention for a title, way down in 5th position. He did remedy this in Portugal, where he scored a 3rd place to move himself up to 3rd in the overall point standings, but things got even worse for him when his engine got waterlogged and gave out in Corsica. The only consolation for those two rallies is that Sainz finished 7th and 8th respectively, which, again, based off of the scoring system, gave him no points either. So instead, with both of our protagonists falling by the wayside, Colin McRae made his championship presence known after a rough start with 3 retirements. He won in France, which jumped him in the championship lead 2 points over Sainz. Mäkinen was also present in the championship, down in 6th position, an entire rally win behind McRae, and McRae's efforts jumped Subaru into the Constructors' title lead for the first time this season. So, that was the first half. It was a bit wild. Sainz was leading for a very large portion of it before Colin came back in force in the last 2 rallies. The second half was marked with Mäkinen starting to get his act together. He finally drove with the 2-time champion that he was, with his 2nd win of the season as Sainz continued to shadow him in 2nd place. But the big story of Argentina was McRae, who bent his control arm into a boomerang on a rock. Normally, that would be game over, but he fought fire with fire and bent it back into shape by beating with another rock, and despite having to do all that, he managed to finish in the points. Man is a legend. And Colin's year continued to get better when he won Greece as Mäkinen and Sainz struggled. He was leading by a pretty good margin. New Zealand was up next, and it was Colin's best rally. He'd won it 3 times in a row before. But in 1998, he had a puncture chasing down Sainz, who won for the first time since the season opener in Monaco. I gotta say, props to Sainz. I mean, he has only won 2 rallies up to this point, and he is still vying for the lead of the championship through sheer consistency. Well played to that man. Sainz's win gave him a 3-point lead over McRae and a 13-point lead over Mäkinen, while Toyota had an 11-point lead over Subaru, with Mitsubishi a further 3 points behind. If Mäkinen and Mitsubishi wanted any hope of a title, they would have to turn it up. And with 4 rounds to go, that is exactly what they did. He won his home rally at the Finnish Grand Prix and just did not let up. He won again in Italy and then again in Australia, giving him 30 precious points for his championship efforts. That has to be the greatest recovery drive in the history of the WRC. I mean, he was losing the championship by 13 points. And in the span of just 3 rallies, he nearly tripled his overall points total. But it still was not easy pickings despite winning 3 rallies in a row, because Sainz stayed as consistent as always with 2 second-place finishes and a 4th, giving him 15 points, which put him behind Mäkinen for the first time by just 2 points. So it was very close between those two, but the worst hit was McRae. With a best finish of 3rd and another retirement in Finland, he went from leading by 5 points in Greece to 3rd, 13 points behind the leader. And with only 1 rally left, he was mathematically out of championship contention, meaning it had become a 2-horse race between Mäkinen at 58 points and Sainz with 56, while Toyota led Mitsubishi by just 4 points. So it would truly go down to the wire in the final rally of the season for both championships. And the last rally is, as always, Wales, and Mäkinen did not have the best of starts, dropping down to 10th on the first day. Then things got even worse. An oil slick was left on a corner of the 5th stage, and for some reason nobody bothered to tell the drivers. So when Mäkinen went around said corner, he slid wide and detonated his right rear suspension component on a concrete block. But being the title decider, he didn't give up and continued to drive as fast as he dared with 3 wheels on his wagon. He was making surprisingly good progress for missing 25% of his suspension, but the British police were having none of it, as on the way back to the paddock they declared his vehicle unsafe for the road and forced him to retire on the spot. Mäkinen was despondent and just wanted to pack up and leave that day, but Mitsubishi sort of forced him to stay, since his teammate could still theoretically salvage the constructor's title. The driver's hill, though, seemed all but decided. With his rival out of the race, all Sainz had to do was finish 4th to take the crown by 1 point. And that is exactly what he was doing, just cruising along in 4th position, simply driving fast enough to score the points. In one interview, he said he was only going about 20%. It was nice and easy, no need to drive hard, risk a crash, especially when his teammate retired with a broken clutch. That meant the final day of the season was already dramatic as Richard Burns took the lead after more Subaru troubles, giving Mitsubishi a shot at the championship. With Burns leading, Sainz now had to finish 2nd to get both titles. But it was at this point that everybody who's familiar with this season knows what happened. Rallying giveth, and rallying taketh away. As Sainz was finishing the last stage, his engine decided to try some spontaneous external combustion, and less than 500 meters before the finish line of the final stage of the final rally of the season, the Corolla ground to a halt. And with all the championship contenders DNFing, Mäkinen took a shock 3rd championship by less than 500 meters, 2 points separating him from Sainz. I mean, sure, there have been a lot closer championships. There have been several decided by just 1 point. But in terms of distance, in terms of being so close to success, nothing comes close to the heartbreak of Sainz in 1998 season with his broken down Corolla. Mäkinen was understandably ecstatic and shocked. Nobody expected him to win. He didn't expect him to win. And yet, he took the title. He only led the standings for 1 rally, but it was the 1 rally that mattered. And for the cherry on top of Mitsubishi's sundae, Burns won the rally, securing Mitsubishi's first and only World Constructors title by 6 points. Now that was not the end. Mäkinen would go on to take a record 4th consecutive title in 1999 before retiring in 2003, and rather ironically, he later became the team principal of Toyota's current WRC program, which won 3 manufacturer championships and 4 drivers' championships. Sainz, on the other hand, never won another title, although he did help Toyota win their last constructors' title in 1999 before they left for Formula 1. Sainz, though, decided to stick with the dirt, winning 3 Dakar rallies and working with Volkswagen on their Polo WRC program that would win 4 consecutive driver and constructors titles. Sadly though, Colin McRae would never get to see any of this as he died in a helicopter crash in 2007. But just for one brief period of time, 3 of the best drivers in the world, 3 of the most famous and most successful drivers in the world, with 3 of the most iconic cars in the history of rallying, went head-to-head for one epic season in 1998.